we're in Taf Monday, the Ramah at the end of Aruch. So the Mechaber had told us all the things you have to do about Kashering on Erev Pesach, all the kulas that you may have if you kasher before the 4th hour, and then all the chumras you have if not for that. And the Ramah says, if you didn't kasher before the end of the 4th hour, so then Yachol Lahagil Ad Pesach, you can kasher the whole Erev Pesach. Meaning, and you have to follow all the chumras. That's what the Mechaber talked about. But you can kasher the rest of the day until Pesach. But you can't. He means in that day. But you can't kasher on Pesach. Once it comes Pesach, chametz is the marshu. Ve'in amoil hagol. It won't have to do any hagol. Because any bleed that goes out will come right back in. So chametz is the marshu. So you can't have shishim connected. Shishim, the word connected kli is not going to help. The kli being ein ben yom is not going to help. We'll get to that in a second. So you can't kasher on Pesach. Let me just explain that part. You can't, if it'll be ein ben yom, you won't be able to kasher either, because there's a machlokes in Taf Mem Zayin. The Mechaber says that ein ben yom is mutter on Pesach. Just like ein ben yom, but the is mutter the whole year round. It's also mutter on Pesach. And the Ramah there is machmir. The Ramah there brings from a Rajba, and he's machmir to say that ein ben yom is asur. And so, therefore, how are you going to kasher on Pesach? You can try to kasher on Chol Hamoed. The bleed is going to go out. It'll be ein ben yom, but it'll make the water chametzik, and then that water will make the kli chametzik again. So you won't have genitiv. So therefore, you're not allowed to kasher on Pesach. Avo mutter laban kli tach Pesach, but you can do liban on Pesach because liban. This is because everybody says, except for some achronim, but just about every single person says that there's a difference between liban and hagolah. Hagolah draws the bleed out of the water, so therefore you have a chash that the water can go back in, the bleed can go back in. But liban doesn't draw the bleed out; it burns the bleed, it incinerates the bleed, and since it destroys the bleed, so no question of it coming out and having to go back in. But there's nothing to go back. It didn't come out, and it's not anything. It's just being completely.
If you know that liban is moist, then you have to it goes back in.
So now, if you would hold like that, if you hold that in theory you would, okay. Now we've talked about this. There's a Pri Megadim who talks about it. He says, what about by leaving kal? He says by leaving kal, he thinks that what happens is the bleed is drawn out, not that it gets burned. Because to burn, you need leaving gamba. So leaving kal is draws it out. So he says, efshur, that if so, you should not be allowed to do leaving kal on Pesach or when it's ben yomer, because the bleed will come out and it'll be reabsorbed afterwards. Okay. Now most people do not agree with that. We talked about this back when whoever. Most people don't agree with that because there's no method for it. First of all, there's no way for it to get back in. There's no medium for it, no liquid for it to get back in with.
Well,
and second,
the bleed itself is liquid.
The bleed itself is a liquid. Okay. I don't know what you call it. Okay.
If you believe it, it's a bleed.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, okay. But how does it go back in though? It goes
a liquid.
It's not.
It goes into the air. What's it going to take it back in? If it's sending it out, why should it?
It's medubal to the sun. The first second is also sun.
I actually just saw I think it's Pri Megadim who says. Who says that he says, you know, when you say there's no bleed goes from one kli to another kli without rights in between, he said if there's a tiny bit of moisture, he says it doesn't count. When you say bleed rights, it has to be a meaningful amount. Again, it's a right from Mechaz Yaakov who talks about when you have a covered kli, there's no bleeds go through it. But he says there's always a tiny bit of moisture. That tiny bit doesn't count. Okay, so I don't know how much is coming out, but we assume that it's. But there's a better answer. The better reason is because there's a din in your day that if a little bit of
I don't know if that's a good raya because you don't want to go from one kli to another kli. You want to use writers, maybe you need meaningful amount of writers, but when it's coming out,
so maybe just to get in.
The writer itself is going back in over here.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah. If you have a drop of tray for writers or something.
Okay, so let's instead of arguing with that, but the simple kasha on it is that the din is that if a little bit of the end rolls under a kli, it makes it bleed. But if it's on the fire, it doesn't. And the reason is because that little bit amount of the end gets burnt up before it gets absorbed. So over here, the little bit that's left, whatever little bit's coming out, obviously it says little.
The one that comes out, the fire comes out.
It's going to be because you're using the fire. Okay, so anyhow, that's a little bit. But anyhow, so I'm leaving gomer. The Mechaber is not leaving gomer. He says no, you can't do leaving gomer.
Even if whichever sheet you hold, not after you only stuff from koyim. Even if you hold it might be the bleed.
So you're saying so therefore I can maybe really even leaving gomer also draws it out. And there's no right from this din because in this case it's drawing it out, but it's burning it up immediately. Okay, you could say that, but the simple answer, the simple explanation is like everybody, just about 90% of people say is that leaving burns it, destroys it, and Hagolah draws it out. Okay, so that's the simple reason why you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Now Lastly, Rama says, if you do Hagol before Pesach,
so you could do Liban on Pesach?
You can do Liban on Pesach, yes, you can. And actually, usually you think of doing Kashering on Chomod. There's a din in Taf Kuf Tes maybe, whatever it is, that you can do Liban Kal on Yontif also. He's not talking about Pesach. And Hilchos Yontif, it's Tikkun Mana, but Liban Kal you could do if you do it right, because when you preheat the Kli to put it into the oven, you could get a Liban Kal thrown in by that also. So you might even be able to do it on Yontif itself, but that's not what he means. He means it's really for Chomod that you're allowed to do Liban. Okay, when you do Hagol before Pesach, La'achar Sheish, after the 6th hour, which the Mishnah Berurah says means after the 4th hour. Okay, he's using La'achar Sheish, but it means La'achar the 4th hour, when the Chametz is also. Tzarech Lizar B'chol Advarim HaNizkarim, Shein Tzarech Lizar B'hem Kalim Sheish. Whatever the Mechaber said, that before Sheish you don't have to be machmir for those things, he's speaking out, but after Sheish you do have to. Okay, he's just telling you the Mechalav is Atash Mehem, that after the time of that Chametz is also, you have to be Choshish for the things that Kriyas Be'en Ben Yoymaya has the Or Shishim, and all the things that the Mechaber talked about, that we talked about last time. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is the Ramah said, really he's bringing you the end of a din that he said in Taf Mem Zayin, which is chametz, which is Eina Ben Yoma, is aser on Pesach. Okay, I believe that Eina Ben Yoma usually year round, so that Eina Ben Yoma is mutter. The belief that comes out Eina Ben Yoma is mutter, and on Pesach it's aser. Okay, that's the machlokes in Taf Mem Zayin. The Ramah is machmir in Taf Mem Zayin. Okay, so the first thing is, that is to say, the Mechaber who holds that Chametz is Eina Ben Yoma is mutter on Pesach, but yeah, of course it's mutter on Pesach, will hold that you can kasher on Pesach, which is why the Mechaber doesn't say anything like this. Okay, this is all a Ramah, because it's Ramah, so to speak, L'Shita says Ramah holds that you can't kasher, that Eina Ben Yoma is also on Pesach, so the Ramah holds that on Pesach you can't kasher. The Mechaber holds that Chametz is also b'mashur, so you can't kasher with using Shishim connected to Kli on Pesach, but you could kasher by using Eina Ben Yoma. That you could do. According to the Mechaber, you'd be allowed to do that. Because Eina Ben Yoma, you could kasher like that. It's just the Ramah who holds.
What do you mean? By Eina Ben Yoma, okay, yes, we do say there's a mashur of B'liyas by Eina Ben Yoma.
So there's a machlokes in Taf Mem Zayin. Even though Chametz is mashur, and even though in Yerdei we're machmir to say that Eina Ben Yoma there is food in there, it's just that it's lefkam. There's a machlokes whether on Pesach you have to be choshish for that b'diavad. When the food came to your food b'diavad, the Mechaber holds you don't have to. If you by mistake use a chametz stick pot on Pesach, a chametz stick on Pesach. But every time you do hagol, that's the same as b'diavad, because this is a run that when the bleed comes out of the kli, it goes into the water. You have no interest in the water and getting bleeds into there, so that you don't have to be worried about that you bitlos the chatchila and things like that. Every time you kasher with Eina Ben Yoma, you're relying on the fact that Eina Ben Yoma is mutter b'diavad. That you're always relying on that. Every time you kasher with the kli of Eina Ben Yoma, drawing the bleed.
Normally, you mean. Because normally it's only a mashur, the bleed is only a mashur, so the bottom of the water, so it's bottom.
It's not a mashur. Every time you kasher, you say the kli is Eina Ben Yoma. You have all this bleed coming into your water. You say, oh, but it's lefkam, so don't worry about it.
Now, don't we say that it has a bit of
yes. Not whether it's a mashur. The machlokes is whether when the bleed is in the kli, is the blia l'shvach or l'fkam? If you were to take a bite out of the kli, if you to somehow get it out, would it be l'sh? So we're machmir to say that it's considered l'shvach. In there, it's still an edible. Not l'shvach. It's an edible. It's not inedible. It's still edible while it's in there. And when it comes out, it's l'fkam into other foods. And therefore, we hold that it has to be bought the baroy. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
You put the baroy. Yeah, that's machlokes. It's not ashra. Yeah. One of them holds that it loses mamish garnish.
It's an edible. One holds that it becomes niftal me'achila. And since it's niftal me'achila, so it's nothing. It's not ashra at all. And the other one holds that no, it's not niftal me'achila. And that has to do with Taf Mem Zayin. That child in Taf Mem Zayin is dependent. Has to do with this rise from Zayin also. It's all related. Okay. But today we're going to talk about different things. The Ramah is saying a chumrah that since you can't kasher, since chametz that's Eina Ben Yoma is asher on Pesach, therefore you can't kasher. That's a chumrah. Okay? So what we're going to talk about is the Chacham Tzvi, a very famous Chacham Tzvi, who makes a kula out of this thing. Okay? So we'll get to how he gets to the kula in a second, but first let's just say how he starts off. The Chacham Tzvi says, it's a well-known tshuva. He says like this. He has a kasha. We mentioned the din a few weeks ago that a person, if you have a barrel that's held together with a paste made out of flour and water, like most barrels are, even today, you have the barrel held together with flour and water. If that barrel sits for 2 months without being used, dries out for 2 months, you could use it for Pesach. Because we say the flour and water, it's as pure chametz as you could get. The flour and water paste that's in there becomes dried out and becomes not edible, and it can't answer the wine that you're going to put in afterwards. Okay, to the point that you can even leave wine in there on Pesach. I mean, even if the bleeds are coming out on Pesach, you could still use it. It's okay. Okay, that is completely considered dried out. You could do whatever you want.
2 months, the shears?
2 months. That's the shears. 2 months. Fred, so Chacham says, wait. If in 2 months a paste of absolutely pure chametz, okay, absolutely pure chametz, can dry out in 2 months and be considered nothing completely, and you can put wine into it and leave wine in there on Pesach. He says, well, why don't we say the same thing for a blia? Why don't we say that if a blia sits in the kli for a certain amount of time, then it should become so dried out that it should become mutter? He says, how you can only imagine that the blia has a similar din to the be'en. If we have a shear, 2 months it gets dried out. So there must be some kind of a shear for the blia. So he says, you could, I don't want to say that it's going to be 2 months, that's pushing it. He says, but I have a raya. I know I have a shear of when it should be, how long it should take. Okay, so now before he gets to the shear, there's a side point, which is according to what you mentioned just a second ago, the Ran and the Rashba. If we would have had to guess, when does it become so dried out that it becomes not edible? Okay, it's a machlokes rishonim, or partially it's a machlokes rishonim. According to those who hold that when it's ein ben yom, it becomes nifsal me'achila. Right, there are those rishonim. I forgot if it's the Rashba or the Ran that we're just talking about. And it becomes nifsal me'achila when it becomes ein ben yom. That's the shear. After 24 hours of being in a kli, it becomes nifsal me'achila. So according to some rishonim, we know exactly what it is. After 24 hours, it's nifsal me'achila. But but we're machmir for the others who say that it stays royal achila even after 24 hours. So that's sort of who he's going to. So he says, I have a shear. I know what the shear is. They say, look in Hilchos Kli Yayin. The din is that if you have a barrel that was used for stam yayin, and the barrel sits for 12 months, then you're allowed to use the barrel without kashering it. Okay? We say that the blia that's in there dries up. That's the word that it uses. It dries up and it becomes inedible. And now you could use the barrel without kashering. So for a paste of chametz, the shear is 2 months. 2 months of paste of chametz be'en takes 2 months. Because you want to know how much the shear is for a blia. There's the din. That if it sits for 12 months, it becomes mutter. You're allowed to use the kli. So he says, misvara, you should say that after 12, even though Ein Ben Yomer, it's really mutter, it would be mutter midaraisa, there's a gzera Ein Ben Yomer, Atar Ben Yomer. But after 12 months, you should be allowed to use the kli without kashering at all. Okay, there's no more kli there at all. So now, you can ask me, it's an obvious question. So why does it only say that in Hilchos Kli Yayin? How come it doesn't say that every place else? Why does it only say that in one place that you could do like that? So he says like this. He says, if you have a kli that is also when it's ein ben yamin, okay, that's also when it's ein ben yamin, so then you're not allowed to use it when it's ben yamin. I'm sorry, if you have a kli that's mutter b'di'evid when it's ein ben yamin, okay, so then we're choishish that people will end up using it instead of waiting 12 months, they'll wait less than 12 months. Okay, we have a chashash that since the kli is mutter to the evid after 24 hours, so people will make the mistake and not get to 12 months straight. It's like a gzeira, more than 12 months up to less than 12 months. But if you have a kli that's also even when it's ein ben yamin, okay, so then no one's going to end up making that mistake. So we'll say that even if you wait after 12 months, then it's mutter l'chatchila to use the kli. And he says, now I'm not sure what he's talking about. He says, but in Hilchos Kli Yayin, kalim of yayin are also even in ben yamin. I think he means within that kalim of wine, because wine is special. I don't exactly understand this. I'm saying what I'm assuming he means. So it stays l'shvach even after when it's in ben yamin, and therefore since any kli which stays usher even when it's ein ben yamin, when it becomes 24 months, when it comes after 12 months, it's mutter to use the kli l'chatchila.
Well, when we make a thing there, we make ein ben yamin to ben yamin. So
he says so we should make the same gzera 12 months up to not 12 months. Okay.
Like ein ben yamin to ben yamin.
Yes.
The same gzera should apply by one.
I don't remember what it says about that. So he said so he said, so by Kli Yayin is the normal case. He says, but there's another case. He says, by chametz, according to the Ramah, who holds that chametz, which is any b'yomim, is asur. So we will answer any keli of chametz that's any b'yomim, we'll say it's asur. You're not allowed to use it. So in Cain, after 12 months, you should be allowed to use it. Okay, so he says chametz, according to the Ramah, is the same as klei yayin. So the reason why he only says the din by yayin is because yayin is the only food that stays also when it's any b'yomim. And chametz has a similar thing. Chametz, according to Ramah, is a chumrah. According to Ramah, is chumrah. That chametz is any b'yomim stays also. So we have a kula that will end up that after 12 months you could use it without kashrus. You could use it without kashrus. So he says he's not ready to say that it's mutar l'chafila. The case that he's talking about is that it's a case of b'diavad. Okay, so what he says is he holds that at least b'diavad you should say that it's mutar after 12 months. But his svara is that it should be mutar after. There's two levels to svara. One level is that at least for Pesach, in theory, it should be mutar l'chafila. And if you really go back to what he said, his original kasha, which was if paste could dry it in 2 months, that's the end. Then surely blia should dry it. It should be for all Yisurim. Okay, and he has to try to finagle a way around it. Okay, there's different levels in what he says. Okay, so now there's a prima gadam about this Chacham Tzvi. It's in Kuf Gimel, which is about Ein Binyamin, and he says like this. He says that the machlokes, he brings others who argue in the Chacham Tzvi. The Panim Iris, who I think is related to him, maybe you can tell me. I think that he's related to him. I think the Panim Iris is related to Chacham Tzvi, somehow I think. Okay, who argues on him? If I remember, I saw someplace that they had chuvas to each other back and forth about this shaila. The Panim Iris. What's the shaila again? About whether if a kli that's ain't been yorim, if a kli that hasn't been used for 12 months, if you could use it without kashrus. So we're talking. There's a famous Chacham Tzvi that's what we're talking about, that who holds that you could do it in certain cases. By chametz you could do it, but he doesn't say that. No, he says by chametz, and he says actually in cases b'diavad. Okay, we'll get to the hefsem.
Even if it was used, right?
Even if it was used during the 12 months.
For kosher.
I don't know. You're saying it's because what's the difference? I know because it's supposed to be drying out and become now in klei yayin. Oh, you're right, because in klei yayin, even if it was used in between. That's as long as it's for kosher. I believe that is. I think it says that even if it held water in between, that it's considered to be dried out. I'm not sure. He's talking about it because mamish was not used, which is the normal what people are talking about this house, things that were not used at all. Okay, but it's negaya. Yes, it's negaya in companies who use it for 12 months.
And then they use kosher for the next 12 months, right?
Right. Okay, I think that the din by klei yayin is that it is. Okay, I think that even if it was used in between, it's still. I don't know. We could check that. So the Prima Gadol says in the Machlokes is like this. He says, I'm not giving you all the details because I don't know them, but the Prima Gadol says like this. He says, some hold, the Chacham Tzvi holds that if a be'en could dry out and become inedible after 12 months, by him it's a kol shekain that a blia could do that. The blia is even less of a be'en. And the others hold that the fact that the blia is inside of the kli keeps it protected. It keeps it from becoming dried out. I mean, they would agree in theory that it can get dried out and become mutter, but the kli is, so to speak, protecting it and helping it, stopping it from getting dried out. Okay, that's what he says. That's how he runs the chat. And the Prima Gadol says another thing, which I don't understand it. I don't know enough to understand it. He says that even the machmirim will agree that if it's only kavush, and he says of any isser, then after 12 months it'll be mutter. Okay, even the machmirim will agree that if the way the thing became usher was through kavush, without any heat, then after 12 months it'll become mutter also. And the only machlokes is when it became a blia through heat, then they hold that the blia stays strong even after 12 months. Okay, and one of his rayas is, he says, the Gemara says, like Kashrus, HaTorah Hi'ida she'eina yotze mitoch dofer la'olam, that the blia never leaves. He says, what do you mean never? According to Chacham Tzvi, after 12 months, we should say that it's gone. There's no more blia left at all. Why does the Torah say, and there are others bring such rayas like this, he says, why does the Gemara say that it never leaves it? Never. It's not true never. There's a share of 12 months. Okay, so that tells you that inside of a kli, once blew into a kli, it's more protected and it can last for longer. Okay, that's what he says. Okay, now.
What do you say from there? What are you showing from there?
He's showing from there that even though the end might dry out at a certain amount of time, but a blia stays. It doesn't disappear.
Okay, here's something to do. What's it with coverage and all that?
No, two different things. I'm sorry. Two different things. No, I'm sorry. I'm not connected to coverage. Just back to his original right.
See,
that's one of the writers that they asked on Chacham Tzvi. Yeah, he just
What's not if it's Einer ben Yemen, what's Pshat Gemara?
So we say, according to those Rishonim hold that Einer ben Yemen becomes completely inedible, L'chayra, this whole Chacham sees is we don't know enough to say. Oh, how will the Gemara understand the Einer Yosef Tef Gemara?
I don't know.
I don't know. It doesn't worry, but I mean, it gets spoiled and rotten.
Again.
I don't know. It's going to put around number.
Maybe Loilam means really. It doesn't have to be forever.
Means really?
Really.
What do you mean by that?
Loilam, really.
Yeah, but what's the gay?
Not forever. You can't take it literally.
There's not a community guys.
Okay.
Or in normal circumstances.
So I think it's completely garnished. So how does he learn the Gemara? I think it means that you can't get it out. You can't get it out. It might be spoiled. It might be spoiled, but you just can't get it out. So usually, once it's anybody, who cares that you can't get it out? Well, you really don't care, but it's as far as whether it maybe could become spoiled. Okay, fine. This is not the strongest line in the book. Okay, so now the next thing's like this. Rabbi Kreke asks a question. He says, you're telling me that this din is not specific to Klei Yayin. It's really for any isser where the food stays for more than 12 months. It could apply to other cases. He says, I don't know. He says there's a bunch of Rishonim who say that din is. They say it's specific, a special kula for Stam Yayin. It's not a. They don't connect it to any of these things, and they don't see. I don't think that Rabbi Kreke says these words, but L'Shitasei, the Rashba is the one who holds that when a kli is our Ramah comes from a Rashba. The Rashba holds that when a kli on Pesach, he's the one who says that it's also to eat on Pesach. He says that part of chametz being asur mashu is that when chametz is it's also asur. So how can you say that the Rashba says the din of waiting 12 months, that if the 12 months become mutter, is only by Klei Yayin? So the Rashba himself is the one who should say no. According to the Rashba, according to the Chacham Tzid's Cheshbon, he should say, by chametz also should be mutter. So what is it? So how can you tell me that it's only a din by that din over there? It's not just by Klei Yayin. It's by any kind of din. It would apply to all kinds of cases. This is not true. The Rashba says it's special for Klei Yayin. Okay, and if it will help you hear it in a different way, Ramoshi gives a shot in what the Chacham sees as why should it be special by Yayin? Okay, this will maybe help understand the premium's question, the Refrain's question. What's the reason why it's only by Klei Yayin? What's special about Yayin? Why? How does anybody understand why it's only by Yayin that you should be after 12 months? So Ramoshi says, that wine. The issue of Stam Yayin is different than all the other Yisurim we know about. Because as follows: wine is asur because it has a chashivus to it. Wine is not asur just because it's the etzem asur, like a piece of chazer is asur because it is a piece of chazer. A diluted piece of chazer is as asur as a regular piece of chazer. I mean, total it's not nice in town, but a diluted piece is just as asur as any other piece. But diluted wine, when wine becomes batal b'shisha, it doesn't have its chashivus anymore. It's not wine anymore. So wine is only asur because it has the chashivus of wine. When it loses that, it becomes not asur at all. So he says, so therefore wine its isser is different than other kinds of foods. So if the wine sits for 12 months to the point that it's dried out. Ramesh says it's not becoming nifsal me'achila. At 12 months it's becoming dried out to the point that it doesn't have that chashivus of wine. He says, so then it loses its isser that it has along with it. It's like, I know it's not that, but it's like being mevatel b'shisha. So you're making it not as chashuv as it was before. So maybe real foods, they don't become nifsal. Nothing special happens after 12 months. But what happens is that after this much of time, they become so dried out that they're not, doesn't have that chashivus anymore, and it would be much of that. So Moshe wants to say Inyan, he says is the same thing should apply then if you have from milchiks to fleishiks. He says his true review is about a person who had china from the great grandmother, and they had very valuable china that they wanted to sell to someone, and it was I think fleishiks, and they wanted to sell to someone who would buy it but wanted to use it for milchiks, and it was a big hefset. So Moshe says the Chacham Tzvi's kula about something that's has been used for 12 months also applies going from basar to chalov. He says because basar also has a similar din. This is din of not barnat by basar and chalov, which is when something is fleishiks and the tam gets weakened, it becomes mutter also. It no longer can make things asur anymore. He says you see a similar din. He says wine doesn't even have that din. Wine doesn't even have the din of not barnat. So things that basar also has this thing that when you weaken it, it becomes not basar anymore, so to speak, in a little bit of a different way, but it becomes not basar also. So he says, so from basar the chol to chacham tzis, it also applies. Okay, so that helps. Okay, so now Rav Moshe says there's a different Rav Moshe who says a whole different angle on this chacham tzis. He says like this. He says we would think, and this has to do with what Rabbi Krieger talks about in his tshuva. But Rav Moshe says like this: you would think, if you were to explain this din of after 12 months something happens, what would be the gzeira? And we say in a regular kli, let's use a kli for treif. After 12 months, the chacham tzis says no, you can't use it. You can't use it even after 12 months. You would understand that that's an extension of the din of the gzeira eina ben yom ata ben yom. Really, after 24 hours, the kli becomes mutter. The chacham said no, even after 24 hours, it's mutter anyhow. Because we're afraid you're going to use it within 24 hours. And now we would think is that you would say it like this. Now 12 months later, the Isser goes to an even lower level. It went from being Eina Ben Yoma to being 12 months old. It's even worse. Really, it should be Mutal Chatchil at that point. So you would think that the Isser after 12 months is really a loy plug of the din of Eina Ben Yoma. Really, after 24 hours, it's Mutter. Chacham said, and they gave no expiration for that Eina Ben Yoma. They said the Gzeir of Eina Ben Yoma doesn't stop at 12 months like you might think it would. It stays also forever. That's how you would think of it. Rav Moshe thinks that's not correct. Rav Moshe thinks it's as if two different Gzeiros. There's a Gzeir of Eina Ben Yoma. That Gzeir expires after 12 months, and after 12 months there's like a different Gzeir of Gzeir after Yud Beis Chodesh to Kodim Yud Beis Chodesh. Okay, why does Rav Moshe want to say that? Rav Moshe said that to say that gzeir after 12 months is even weaker than the gzeir of Eina Ben Yoma Ata Ben Yoma, and therefore b'makom hefsed meruba you could allow someone to use a kli that hasn't been used for 12 months even from other rishon. He said even though the chacham tzis doesn't say that, the chacham tzis says he's only talking about chametz, and even when he says about chametz, he only says about the diavad. That's the use of l'chadchila. Rav Moshe says, but you get the point here is that after 12 months, it's lower level. It's not a regular drabanan. It's a lower level of a drabanan after 12 months. So therefore, you could be makel in special cases, like the makom hefsed meruba, things like that. But if it's after 12 months, in ways that you would not be makel if it was just Eina Ben Yoma. Okay, so Rav Moshe in those shuvas wants to say not just for dishes that were fleishes, you want to use for nuchas, things that were completely treif, you want to use them for kosher, and you should be allowed to use them even. If it's after 12 months, if there's some kind of special hefsed meruba, takanas hashavim, all the other tziyutim that Rav Moshe wants to say with it.
Well, he's not a ma'aser matter though. I think he told us in that case
he is. Rav Moshe is with enough tzirufim. Rav Moshe says that it is mutter. He doesn't say it by itself, but with other tzirufim he says it.
And one of them being to be magla 3 times.
Well, Hagol 3 times. What I'm saying is, but the point I'm not talking about that side of it. That was a different discussion we had once. Is that how come Rav Moshe needs more tzirufim and less tzirufim? We talked about how come sometimes he lets you away with less. In this case, sometimes with more tzirufim, sometimes less. That's Rabbi Shachar has a pshat. We talked about that. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But he's saying is, but even though the Chacham Tzvi says, I'm only being makel for Pesach, and he has a whole question why it's only mutter for Pesach, and even though he only matter b'diavad, Rav Moshe is saying you can use that kula after 12 months, even for regular Risurim, and even l'chatchila. Okay, and Rav Moshe says, I'm telling you, I know the Chacham Tzvi says that it's only for certain Risurim, but really that teaches us that after 12 months the Isser is on a different level, and you could be makel even for other Risurim in the right situations. Okay, and therefore he has tzirufim to say that he feels this is the right situation to be makel. Okay, and in fact, a lot of the achronim who disagree with the Chacham Tzvi, including like the Pri Megadim, who doesn't agree with it, say in the right situation they make the Pri Megadim in Hanhag Sharav initial says that like the makom has to rub it to be samech on it. A lot of people who don't agree with it, but in the right situation do agree with it. Okay, so there's really a few levels over here. The Chacham Tzvi said after 12 months. For chametz b'diavad, the kli wasn't used for 12 months, and b'diavad you could use it on Pesach. You could use it, it had been used on Pesach, b'diavad the food is kosher. That's what he said. That's the only case he said was mutter. And like the Chacham Sodom said, the Chayadim said like that, he brings this in that b'diavad after 12 months, if you didn't use it, and it was Pesach, the food is mutter b'diavad. That's like the lowest level of kul that there is, and that's the Chacham Tzvi. Others say that maybe it's even in more cases, to the point that people like Rav Moshe saying, even by regular Yisurim and even l'chatchila, in the right situation, with the right tzirufim, a person could be maybe samech on this thing. those truths of Moshe are rather famous. Those kulas that he has, and it's very lemaisa, especially because his shirufim are things that are reasonably common, things that cost a lot of money, and takon sashavim, and things like that for people who are bali tshuva. So here, back to, if I could just pull us back to this for 1 second. Here we're talking about, the Ramah said a chumrah. The Ramah said a chumrah that a person can't, and this is, Ramah talks about this also. The Ramah said something that's just a chumrah. He tries to say, l'chumrah, we're going to say that Ein ben Yoimai is also on Pesach b'diavad, and therefore in Tafan Fai says therefore the food is treif, and over here he's saying therefore you can't kasher. That's what he's saying as something as a chumrah to be choshev shelo shitas. What Chacham sees is saying that it comes out of kula from that sheet that since l'maisa we're not. Since Lamaisa we are machmir and say the food is usher, therefore when 12 months comes, it enters a new level on the food. Then
I love that question though. But why is it because the enemy is usher to make it? Why does it depend on that? I missed that stage.
Okay, why does it depend on why?
Why is the Chacham Tzitaka only matter by yayin and not because it's Ein ben Yoimai is usher, so therefore it's you do the chayshus and mutter.
Let me see if I got it straight. I'm not sure if I have 100% sure. Let's see if I got it. He said, if the kli is usher, so then
they don't make a difference in this chaydish. And then that's what's hard.
No, the other way around.
If there's no limit.
No, that's how he said. No, the other way around. If the kli, because that's not because by klei yayin it's also usher. He says if the kli is mutter. Or is that what he says? Maybe you're right. So if by klei, okay, well, we got it. If by klei yayin that Ein ben Yoimai, there's no gzera Ein ben Yoimai usher ben Yoimai, there's no gzera because it's usher by itself. There's no gzera to make it usher. So then we come to a new time, a new thing to be master of the thing, which is after 12 months. Right. So we say, okay, it's after 12 months. There's not that we came to that cool. Right. But if we have something that there's no limit. So then
to finish.
Okay, maybe. Something like that.
Yes, if it's exer, there's no limit.
There's no limit. And it's not very exer. Do we have a limit to a certain amount of time? Yeah, it's also mutter, and it's still has
because they didn't make the exer because it's also anyway.
Right.
No, they get to the chayshus and matter.
No, it's to be said on the Ramah. The Ramah is a chumrah in the beginning. It's a chumrah that the chayshus in the beginning answer. To use them and turn around and make them
on that part, I don't remember who I saw that. They asked this question. So they say it's not. I don't know the answer. I'm sorry. People ask that question. I don't know the answer.
Why by yain is also